All right. Been wanting to do this for a while, black liberals with degrees. Now, this is me, like, I've had conversations with people that I love and respect. Very smart, brilliant black people. It's just that when it comes every 4 years to election time, all that intellect just goes out the window and they just become the most sycophantic, non critical thinking individuals I've ever known. So, this is going to be a whole series. I got plenty of ammo for a lot of people in my life who are smart, brilliant people otherwise, but then just have shit takes when it comes to American politics. Chief among them because they're just incapable of thinking outside of the Democratic Party plantation. That's why I have these chastity belts here. You'll see where where the inspiration for those came from. But without further ado, let's get into this. So black liberals with degrees, the vote blue no matter who crowd. If you don't vote blue, then you ain't black crowd. Biden can get away with saying stuff like that. I mean, if a Republican said that, people would be up in arms, but you know how that go. So, without further ado, let's keep it moving. So meet Carl. Carl's a guy I really respect, a college professor. He was actually my professor. And, we stayed in touch afterwards. Really good guy. He identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, and that part is important for the point I'm trying to make here. It wouldn't be otherwise, but it is here. And also, Carl is a vote blue no matter who shitlib. Okay. Now, I don't mean that derogatory. Well, I do mean it in a derogatory way, but Carl is a great guy. Okay. This is not saying anything about Carl as an intellectual, as a man, as a person. He's a great guy with a great heart. But like I said, sometimes, we just gotta look out for our peoples and, be the Harriet Tubman to their partisan shit livery of wanting to stay on that Democratic Party plantation, right? So it's our obligation to educate the community and to show them that, this blind loyalty to a political party is not really getting us anywhere. So let me define shitlib before we move any further, okay? So the definition of a shitlib: it's a political orientation that prioritizes performative social issues such as, social symbolic identity, language, or corporate style anti-racism trainings, that those fluff to make it seem like they're doing something. Now, they prioritize those performative social issues over substantive material and economic reforms, things like Medicare for all or higher minimum wage, those sorts of things. Criticism of or accountability for the Democratic Party is experienced as intolerable to this group, almost visceral, and treated as a personal affront. So to the black shitlib, or for shitlibs in general, if they hear criticism of the Democratic Party, it feels like a thorn beneath their flesh. Think about that. Absolute obedience to the Democratic Party line is demanded by a shitlib. Any critique is met with accusations of helping Trump or undermining democracy. This posture is often accompanied by an insufferable sense of moral and intellectual superiority towards progressives and those to the left of the Democratic Party. So they look at those folks to the left, like the progressives. They like, oh, you're just stupid. You need to fall in line and get with the Democrats. Your candidate is not going to win. So loyalty to the party supersedes solidarity to the point of shitlibs will disown their own friends and family when they challenge the Democratic Party leadership. For black liberals in particular, political identity is rooted in being Democrat first and black second. Can't tell you how many black women cut off guys just because they weren't voting for Kamala. And that's another one that we're going to get into. That's probably part 2, second episode of Shit Liberty, or Black People with Degrees, because I know a lot of black women who turn their back on people within their own community because they wouldn't vote for Kamala. And they thought that they would even call these people like Kevin Samuels or something like that. Yeah, we're going to talk about how black women are encouraged to tether their identity to the Democratic Party, but that's another talk show. Right now, we're going to focus on Carl, and we're going to focus on the things that he said. But first, continuing on with this shitlib definition, the thing to remember is when it comes to Democrats, you must, according to shitlibs, you must accept all information at face value, right? They accept all information from the Democratic Party at face value. Scrutiny of the Democratic Party narratives is not allowed, according to the shitlibs, okay? It is the absolute truth and 100% the gospel, okay? And they defend the DNC narrative at every opportunity. Okay? Another tenet of being a shitlib. You may never, ever be curious enough to look into things, do your own research, or obtain a different perspective. Ever. You're not allowed to consider other perspectives. You're not allowed to consider other frames of view, other frames of reference. You know? The Democrats are God and their whims are sacrosanct. All right. So for black liberals with degrees, they are black people who tend to be brilliant but notoriously shut down their brains when it comes to information that they receive from the Democrats, the Democratic Party, aligned media, and Democratic Party aligned influencers. Okay? Again, black people with degrees are black people who are pretty brilliant, but they notoriously shut their brains completely off when information comes from the Democratic Party aligned media. You know, you're seeing CNNs, MSNBCs, MS Nows, and Democratic Party influencers. If they hear that information from any of those three sources, it is, you might as well be written in the Bible for them. You know, it is the word of God. Right? So this group, you know, black liberals, they totally fail at critical thinking if the information is received from any of those sources, man. They shut down their brains and obey. Right? Repeating DNC talking points as if they came up with those points themselves. I mean, it's really sad. So they repeat nonsense at face value without ever having verified that information. And they feel like they don't need to verify it because it came from the Democrats, right? So these people choose to put their partisan Democratic Party identity over their racial identity, right? They wouldn't know a psyop if it slapped them in the face. They're just black people who would like essentially cut off their own friends and family if those friends and family like ever had any criticism of the Democrats or said they wouldn't vote for the Democrats for any reason, right? So these people will judge you and be upset with you if you don't vote blue no matter who, you know, and they ain't trying to hear it. They're not interested in hearing any of that. Any criticisms of the Democratic Party, they just can't understand why anyone would not vote Democrat. They just can't understand that. So they demand nothing from the Democratic Party. They just want to stop Trump. That's their sole goal. So, and I get wanting to stop Trump. Like, I understand that. But the stands for the do nothing Democrats, I think they're just as harmful as Trump, to be honest with you. They're just better at marketing, right? And, you know, there are certain boxes that they're not allowed to think outside of, right? Hence the Carter G. Woodson brain chastity belt with the padlock on it, right? So these people are essentially in a cult. And this is their mantra for the black liberals. Whatever the Dems say, I obey. Yep. So black people who are intellectually capable, just sometimes brilliant, but who reliably shut off critical thinking the moment messaging comes from the Democratic Party aligned media, or party influencers. It's really sad. So anyways, let's move on to Carl. So there are two things that I want to address that Carl mentioned. So the first thing is something that he said verbatim, and this is what he said. He said Kamala lost because of racism. He said that verbatim. All right, so we're going to unpack that. Second sentiment that Carl aligns with is, you know, we had somebody who was going to join a meeting, and Carl said, you know, I think that we should invite this person to the space. He's an anti-Trumper and supports democracy. So understand the anti-Trumper part, okay? I mean, I would never get to a point where I just disown my neighbors based on partisan politics. Like, I'm too well versed in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and my main frame of reference for America is looking at it through a lens of class and economics. So when you look at it that way, this partisan nonsense is really just silly. You know what I mean? But the key we want to unpack here is that supporting the Democrats means supporting democracy. That's the key we want to key in on. That's the thing we want to key in on. So let's address both of these. So first, before we even get to both of those, I want to just plead with everybody, the viewers, anybody listening, please decolonize your mind. Please. Let me recommend two books. The first one is from Dr. Naeem Akbar, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. All right. So think about, I want you to listen to, the thesis of this book and how it applies here. So the core argument in Dr. Akbar's book is that oppression persists not only through institutions, but through internalized thought patterns that shape how Black people define success, legitimacy, and belonging. Okay, so now applying that lens to the Black shitlib, right? I think this book will challenge their internalized authority worship. All right, so Naim Akbar, Dr. Akbar argues that psychological slavery trains people to do the following. One, seek validation from dominant institutions. Sound familiar, shitlibs? Confuse proximity to power with liberation. Are you listening, Black women and LGBTQ community? Having proximity to the Democratic Party just because they put you on pedestals and say, hey, these people are the face of our party, when you're really not. They're just using you for identity reasons. And y'all feel so special that, Massa chose y'all. Don't confuse that proximity with liberation. They will drop your ass as soon as they don't need you anymore. Number 3, they mistake symbolic inclusion for structural change. Again, sound familiar, Black women and LGBTQ folks? This is how the Democrats use y'all. I remember, in fact, there was like a week or 2 weeks ago, there was a segment on MS Now. I probably should have included it here, but I had 2 gay Black men. One was a host on this particular show, and the other one was a host on another show. But they're sitting there like just basically towing the line for why we should invade or bomb Iran right now. Again, war and foreign policy are bipartisan. You will not find a difference between Democrat and Republican there. But this is how they use Black, gay, lesbian folks, trans people. This is how the Democratic Party uses them. They put them up as the face to just so they can have a DEI facade, even though the actual substantive underlying structure systems are not changing. They change the surface level. They change what you see. They don't change how the system actually works or how it operates. But that's okay for shitlibs. They're okay with just being. The Democratic Party invited me to be on stage. I feel so special. Again, number 3, mistake symbolic inclusion for structural change. Again, Black women, LGBTQ folks, y'all are being used by the Democratic Party. Y'all are just virtual signal fodder. So I think this book's thesis explains why Black shitlibs treat the Democratic Party as some benevolent authority rather than a power structure to be pressured, negotiated with, or opposed when necessary. Second book recommendation I have, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. And it's fun to think of this book and not even adjust the thesis, but apply these theses of both of these books to modern day shitlibbery, Black shitlibbery, right? So in the book, Dr. Woodson argues that miseducation conditions Black people, including shitlibs, to 1, defend systems that exploit them, like a Democratic Party. Number 2, identify with elites rather than the masses, right? So this is when people cut off their friends, cut off their family because you're not sufficiently opposing Trump the way I think you should, or the way the Democratic Party said that we should. We got our orders. You have to follow them from the Democratic Party. Right? These Black shitlibs. That's going to be my Black shitlib voice. Number 3. They fear independent political thought. Right? They're not allowed to think it unless the Democrats give them the okay. Hence that chastity belt on their brains, right? So I think this directly explains why some black liberal Democrats do the following. Number 1, they police dissent more aggressively than the party itself does. Think about that. That's like the slave telling the runaway slave, you better get your ass back on this plantation. How dare you run away from massa? Number 2, they treat critique as betrayal. Critique of the Democratic Party is betrayal. Number 3, they prioritize respectability over leverage. They don't want leverage from the Democratic Party because they don't want the Democratic Party to deliver anything from them. They just please exist just to save me from Trump. What the fuck are y'all going to do next election cycle when Trump is going? I'm sure most of y'all, most shitlibs are convinced that Trump is going to run a third term. The way things are looking, shit could be unprecedented that way. I doubt it though, but we'll see. I mean, we're in a new era of lawlessness. But who's to blame for Trump even being in office? So Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Woodson, he warns that these shitlibs, quote unquote, become dependent upon the oppressor for thought, direction, and validation. And again, he didn't say that specifically. He wasn't talking about this particular subject in the book, but I'm just applying his thesis to. Y'all get it, I hope. So party elites define what's realistic for shitlibs. The media defines what is serious, what they should be paying attention to. If it's not on the media, it's not nothing I need to be concerned with. Remember, these people live their lives through MSNBC, CNN, and Democratic Party narratives. Okay? And dissenters are labeled as irresponsible or dangerous to the shitlib. Okay? There it is. This is the relationship the Democratic Party has with black people, in my opinion. It's a game of pimps and hoes. Like, it's genuinely embarrassing how so many black people tether their political identity to a party that has such little genuine concern for their well-being. It's like the black community is really treated less as a constituency to be served and more as just a reliable voting block to be mobilized every 4 years, right? Black people are just expected to show up election after election after election after election without receiving any goddamn thing, without receiving anything meaningful, without any meaningful material gains in return. We get nothing. You just need to feel good because the person that's in the chair now is identifies as a black woman. So that's your reward. That's what you get. We get nothing substantive in terms of policy. Nothing. So when it comes to the Democrats, loyalty is assumed, it's not earned. This relationship the Democrats have with the black community is so extractive. Like, votes are demanded, gratitude is expected, and accountability is always dismissed. I know y'all like, but the Republicans. Let me keep going. To Carl's actual claims. Okay, so remember, he made two claims. The first one is Kamala lost because of racism. The Democrats are synonymous with democracy, whereas the Republicans aren't. Okay, so we're going to go with the first one. Start with the first one. Kamala lost because of racism. It's a very interesting take. Of course, Carl didn't provide any receipts for that. I would love for him to show me something. But here's what I think. Here's why I think she lost. Voters agree the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza to prevent civilian deaths. That was October 20th, 2023. New poll suggests Gaza ceasefire arms embargo would help them with swing state voters. Voters want the U.S. to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and to prioritize diplomacy. December 5th, 2023. Voters support the U.S. calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and conditioning military aid to Israel. February 27th, 2024. Majority in the U.S. now disapprove of Israeli action in Gaza. Approval has dropped from 50% to 36% since November. February 6, 2024. Half of UMass poll respondents think Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Most Americans want to stop arming Israel. Politicians don't care. How about that for a democracy? The number of Americans opposed to sending arms to Israel has grown month after month as a brutal war on Gaza grinds on. Poll: endorsing Israel arms embargo would boost Harris's support to 49%. A majority of Democratic voters say the Gaza crisis is either very or somewhat important in determining how they vote. How racist of them. May 8th, 2024. Support for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza increases across party lines. September 9th, 2024, new poll, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan voters believe U.S. is too involved in foreign wars and world affairs. Most worry World War III approaching. There you have it, guys. Kamala lost because of racism. This is article you can read. I think might have been on Medium. I don't know. I'm not sure, but you can Google this from Jules Nader. Kamala would have won with an weapons embargo. All right, so now let's look at here. Biden voters passed on Kamala Harris because of Gaza. New poll shows. Survey found that Harris lost because of Biden administration support for Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Okay, let's read an excerpt here. Get the highlighted and the underlined. Nearly a third of U.S. voters who cast their ballots for former President Joe Biden in 2020 decided against voting for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election because Biden supported Israel's war on Gaza. Should have been genocide in Gaza. A new poll has shown. The poll conducted by the Institute of Middle East Understanding in YouGov attempts to provide a possible answer to the question of why Harris received 6 million fewer votes than Biden received in 2020. The survey, which was released last week, found that 29% of Americans who voted for Biden in 2020 and didn't vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 cited ending Israel's violence in Gaza as their reason for withholding their vote. And that was the largest bloc. The new poll shows Gaza was a top issue for Biden 2020 voters who cast a ballot for someone other than Harris. And this was the poll that they cited. Feel free to go in and look at it yourself. The crosstabs are all there. I know one of the core tenets of shitlibbery is to not look into anything and not verify anything, especially when it comes from the Democratic Party. And then they get mad at me when I call them anti-intellectual. Now, why wasn't there a change between Biden and Harris when it came to Gaza? Why is in there, Trump is, why is it why is there bipartisan support for Israel no matter what? Oh, shit. Could it be that they're both beholden to the same donors? And therefore, it doesn't matter who we vote for? We still get the same policy outcomes? We'll get a genocide regardless? But Harris is the lesser evil here. They're both beholden to Zios, to Zionists. If Kamala were president, we'd be at brunch. This is at the No Kings rally. Look at this shit. This is exactly why the Democrats lose. Shit like this. So the No Kings protest was clearly, very clearly, a top-down, centrally organized effort sponsored by like a handful of hollow-ass branding first CIA corporate cutout organizations. Like, go to the website, man. And go and look into these websites, see who's behind them. There's nobody behind them. Like, it's so obvious. You guys should go to these websites and look behind it. Look who's funding it. Look who's sponsoring it. And look what you find. All right. So anyways, the No Kings rally protest, there weren't any real demands. It was just one vague slogan, which was No Kings. One of the chants I saw was hands off NATO, which tells me everything I needed to know about it. So, this wasn't organic resistance at all. It was just an op. It was a deep state approved marketing campaign. That's all it was. A pressure relief valve designed to keep y'all shitlibs emotionally invested in this two-party duopoly that goes absolutely nowhere and does absolutely nothing for you. This is exactly why the Democrats lose. Of course, her white liberal ass would have been back to brunch. She's probably a Zionist. The rest of us weren't back to brunch if Kamala was here. There was still a genocide going on. So that tells you what this No Kings protest was all about. It's just white liberals who don't give a fuck about what's happening abroad, don't give a fuck about genocide. They just like, whatever the Democrats tell us to do, we will do it. So meanwhile, they out there at the No Kings, nothing materially changes. We still have a military budget built of world conquest proportions. We still have health outcomes that continue to deteriorate. We're still stuck in a wildly expensive for-profit healthcare system that produces massive medical debt. We got predatory student loans that remain untouched. Trump about to start garnishing wages now. We're the Americans are the largest consumers of pharmaceutical and recreational drugs on the planet. This is if people need to find some way to cope with this dystopia, in my opinion. Mental health is collapsing all across the country, yet somehow we're told Trump is the sole cause of all this. Or at least that's what the shitlibs will have you believe, right? And that if we just got rid of Trump, everything will magically be awesome. As if all these problems didn't exist long before Trump came into office the first time. So please, I need y'all to have a memory longer than 2 weeks, please. Some of you seriously need to go out and touch grass. Like y'all really do. Y'all live in a media bubble. You live inside a narrative. You're fully plugged into the matrix. Mistaking spectacle for substance and branding for politics. For real, man. Go out, touch grass, talk to people. At the very least, try a simple thought experiment. Consider that these two parties may be working together at some level because they share class interests, right? So zoom out. Look at this through an economic and class lens instead of a partisan one. Change how you're seeing the board, not just which team you're rooting for, okay? Zoom out. See the big picture. So I doubt any shitlib will know who this person is, but this is Frantz Fanon, and this is what he had to say. The colonial system nurtures the colonized people in such a way as to make them believe that salvation lies in their identification with the colonizers' values. Swap out colonizers for democratic parties. Fantastic book too, The Wretched of the Earth. You guys should read that. Please, decolonize your mind. Please. All right, so let's move on. This was a development recently. The DNC is scrapping its report on what went wrong in 2024. Ken Martin, the Democratic National Committee chairman, ordered the autopsy months ago, but is now said to believe that its release would be counterproductive for the party. Very interesting. I was looking forward to this report. Why wouldn't they want to release it? The Guardian, Democrats won't release 2024 election loss autopsy, DNC chair says. Report on Kamala Harris's loss to Trump would be a distraction as party is putting our learnings into motion. Okay, so why can't we see what the report said? The Democratic National Committee won't release their review of its election loss in 2024, saying it would be a distraction from helping the party win going forward. What is in that report that they feel like would prevent them from winning going forward after they already lost embarrassingly to Trump this last election? I wonder what it could be. NBC News, DNC won't release its report on what was wrong what went wrong for Democrats in 2024. So let's read some excerpts from this one. Let's stick with the bracketed and highlighted. Okay, so in our conversations with stakeholders from across the Democratic ecosystem, we are aligned on what's important, and that's learning from the past and winning the future. Here's our North Star. Does this help us win? If the answer is no, it's a distraction from the core mission. Wow. So check this part out. Frustrated Democrats demanded a top-down look at the national party strategy in the wake of the disappointing 2024 presidential election. And the second bracket here, in an interview at NBC News last year, while he was seeking the DNC chairmanship, Martin stressed the need for an outside audit of everything. And throughout his campaign, he stressed the need for the party to understand why it performed relatively poorly among key constituencies. So it looks like they found out why, and they don't like the answer, and they don't want to share it with us. Why is there this lack of transparency in what's supposed to be the Democratic Party? I think we know what that report says. Leaked DNC autopsy 2024 from the meme industrial complex. Kamala could have chose have any shot whatsoever of beating Trump or commit genocide. She chose to go all in on genocide. But, we don't want to show you the report because we're just going to implement our findings. You don't need to see it. We don't need to be transparent. You obey what we say. I bet you a shitlib would just defend them not showing the report. Well, if they said that they're going to implement the fixes, it's okay. We don't need to know. Fucking black shitlib logic. I'm telling you, man. So let's look at some more. Support for U.S. financial support for Israel. Opposed, 62%. Support, 20%. Unsure, 18%. December 19th. Emma Vigeland. Now, she is a shitlib, but sometimes, broken clocks twice a day. You know how that go. The DNC concealing the 2024 autopsy as if voters don't deserve transparency is in keeping with how they shut out external input on Biden running for re-election. The party making the democracy case is internally undemocratic, staffed by careerists prioritizing their own power. 100%. Now, 4 years, despite all that, she'll still tell you to vote blue no matter who, because that's what shitlibs do. They'll critique the party for 3 years, but then on the fourth year, they'll just be like, okay, shut up. Time to fall in line no matter what. Here's another tweet. Butch Ware. The DNC is wholly owned by the Zionist lobby, just like the Zionist lobby wholly owns the Republican Party. We don't have a democracy. The only reason why they won't release their 2024 autopsy is Palestine. 100%. We know that's what the reason is. I told you in August of last year that they had no path to victory because they had lost Muslim voters in swing states. That's already public knowledge. The autopsy will reveal that they are hemorrhaging young, BIPOC, and working class voters because of the genocide. I agree. I guarantee you that AIPAC and the other Zio lobbies explicitly forbade its release. Autopsy indeed. The Democratic Party died in Gaza. Damn. Fucking burn. Butch Ware. I voted for him and Jill Stein in the last election, by the way. Woo! That was fantastic, man. Autopsy indeed. The Democratic Party died in Gaza. God damn. All right, so now we're going to move on to Carl's second claim. Tethering the Democratic Party to democracy. Okay. Check this out. PA Supreme Court boots Green Party candidate off November ballot. Democrats targeted what they said were disqualifying irregularities and how Green Party candidates for president and vice president file affidavits that accompanying paperwork get on the ballot. The Democratic Party for the 2020 election, they sued to get the Green Party off the Pennsylvania ballot, so I couldn't even vote for them. Now, at that time, I had some issues with the Green Party. I mean, I still do, but like at that time, it was Harry Hawkins? That guy was, and I had some real issues with him, but I still would have voted Green. But damn, I didn't even get the chance. I didn't even get the opportunity because the Democrats said, no, I'm not allowed to. And I wish I had this clip because I had a clip for this, but the Green Party candidates for president did not strictly follow procedures for getting on the Pennsylvania ballot. So what we actually have here, right? So the 2020 election cycle, lawyers aligned with the Democratic Party challenged the ballot access of the Green Party in PA, arguing like technical deficiencies in petition signatures and paperwork. That's a common thing to do, right? And the courts agreed, and so the Greens were removed from the ballot, right? So, I mean, the outcome was procedurally legal under PA election law, yes, but legality does not equal democracy, right? I mean, it was legal to own human beings in this country at one point in time. I mean, I'm sure we can make a distinction between what's legal and what's just, right? So, in my opinion, this 100% conflicts with democratic principles, and I'll give you some reasons why. So, number one, democracy is about voter choice, not party convenience, right? So at its core, democracy is supposed to maximize voter participation, political pluralism, meaningful choices. Removing a party from the ballot reduces options for voters. So how does give me fewer choices on the ballot equal democracy? So if you're a person who doesn't identify with either of the two major parties, you just asked out. If democracy is the will of the people, then fewer choices equals weaker democratic expression. That's just a fact. But the Democrats are a democracy, right? So ballot access laws already favor major parties, though. They already favor like the Democrats and Republicans. Like U.S. ballot access rules are notoriously hostile to third parties. They got high signature thresholds, tight deadlines they have to turn them in for. They got to put up with expensive legal challenges like this. That takes them. That's money they could have been spending on a campaign trail. But no, they got to fight the Democrats in court. So when a major party uses its resources to exploit these barriers, it's like it just reinforces this two-party duopoly. Not a democracy. It's gatekeeping power, not expanding civic voices at all. How is this a democracy, Carl? Also, Think about the vote blue no matter who logic. That prioritizes party survival over any kind of democratic norms. So, like, the implication goes like this: third parties might spoil the election, so we have to block them to save democracy. We have to block another political party to save democracy. You have to have fewer choices so that we can have a democracy. What kind of shit is that? Y'all just repeat stuff without even thinking it through. That's total shit liberty. That's shit lib behavior. Just repeating talking points without even thinking about it, without even thinking it through. Is it even logical? Because the way the Democrats are moving, they like democracy equals one specific party winning. We have to sue to get other parties off the ballot because voters cannot be trusted with more choices. That is the definition of anti-democratic. And then they try to frame it as harm reduction. I mean, it's wild to me. A fourth reason, it exposes a contradiction in the Democratic Party rhetoric. So they talk about how they're the defenders of democracy, they're the champions of voting rights. Off the ballot. That's not voter suppression. Is that championing voting rights? Is that defending democracy? I think it's the exact opposite. Suing to remove an opposing party from the ballot uses the same structural logic as voter suppression. It's just targeted at the political competition instead of targeting individual voters. And again, this isn't unique behavior. This isn't unique to the Democrats, but that doesn't excuse it. Like, Republicans engage in voter suppression all the time, gerrymandering, they do this all the time. But Democrats engage in ballot restriction through legal means. So different tactics, same outcome. Fewer voices, fewer choices at the ballot box, and more centralized power for the two-party duopoly. Calling this isn't both siding the issue. It's just holding the institution itself accountable. So, I mean, this explains to me why the Democrats are so unpopular. Look at this, Democratic Party approval rating. This is in December of last year, not even a month ago. Democratic Party approval rating, 18% approve, 73% disapprove. Trump's in office. Why are so many people just not feeling the Democrats right now? Democrats now have their lowest net approval rating, minus 55% in modern history. This is what happens to a party that stands for absolutely nothing except serving as corporate donors. Let's watch this clip.
Right now. Yeah, I mean, Democrats in the minds of the American public are lower than the Dead Sea. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look. The net approval rating for Democrats in Congress, you said it, Kate Baldwin, the lowest ever. Look at this. Overall, they are 55 points underwater. Their approval rating is south of 20%. It's even worse when you look at independents. Look at this. Negative 61 points. That means that their approval rating is 61 points lower than their disapproval rating. Quinnipiac has been polling this question for the better part of the 21st century. They have never found Democrats, at least those in Congress, in worse shape than they are right now.
That's independents and overall, but what about Democrats on Democrats?
Yeah, what about Democrats on Democrats? So part of the reason overall is so low is independents are driving it low, but that's not the only reason it's so low. What about Democrats on Democrats? Democrats net approval rating of congressional Democrats. I want you to keep in mind, they had never rated Democrats negatively until this year. And right now, what are we talking about? We're talking about a net approval rating from Democrats. This is Democrats on Democrats. Their approval rating is actually lower than the disapproval rating, and that is quite the drop from October. I think during the shutdown, there was a bit of a boost for Democrats, right? There was a rallying around the flag effect going on, but Democrats did not like how that shutdown turned out. They have returned against Democrats in Congress, and you mentioned Dan Goldman in that intro. One of the reasons that Dan Goldman is in trouble right now in a potential primary against Brad Ladner is because at this point, the Democratic base is so upset with Democrats. So even if Democrats take back Congress, don't be surprised if Dan Goldman ain't there because of numbers like this one.
And this is quite a shift that you're looking at here. I mean, so this gets to the midterms, of course. What does this do to Democrats' chances of taking back majorities in Congress?
Yeah, you know, we're talking about it. You mentioned it. What is this, 22-6? That's a 28-point decline falling through the floor. Of course, the question is, can Democrats still take back Congress, even with their ratings as low as this? The answer is low as this. The answer is yes, but in my mind, it's definitely hurting them. Why do I say that? Because take a look at the generic congressional ballot with a Republican president at this point. Look, Democrats are ahead, but they're only ahead by 4 points. Historically, that is quite weak. At this point in the 2017, 2018 cycle was more than double that at 10 points. The same back during George W. Bush's second term in office, where you saw, of course, the Democrats were also ahead by 10 points. So we're talking about a lead of less than half what we normally expect. And I think that's why, at this point, there are a lot of Democrats who might be thinking, hey, we can spike that ball in the end zone But the numbers at this point say, hold on just a minute. Yes, you're on your way to a congressional majority, but it's still a long time. And with numbers like this, considerably weaker than historically speaking, it might be a tougher road to hoe than normally.
Well, especially if you see that.
Yeah, y'all. I mean, why are the Democrats struggling like this? You know, they're the party for democracy. They're the party for, again, this election versus Trump should have been a layup. And it would have been if they actually delivered for their base. They don't. They deliver for their donors by trying to gaslight the base into thinking that they're doing something for them. Too many people have woken up, and they're not going to bail the Democratic Party out unless they get deliverables from that party. They've been talking shit too long. Now it's time to show something. Now it's time to deliver. I don't have any faith in that because, again, it's one big purple party beholden to the same donors, okay? This is a class war. This is not a partisan war. The sooner folks realize that, especially black liberals, the better off they'll be. Because they're setting themselves up for major depression once they find this shit out. And if they find it out too late, if they go their whole lives thinking that the Democratic Party cares about them, it's going to be really hard by the time they get that realization. I really recommend this video from Professor Black Truth. He goes all in looking, and I encourage you to look into some of the claims, that he brought up here, and find the proof on your own of her misdeeds for the black community. She opposed reparations, and not only did she oppose them, she was like, I ain't gonna do nothing just for black people. No. See how dismissive they are about y'all for black folks? But yeah, it's racism why she lost, right? Check out, there was a New York Times op-ed written by a black lawyer, a black woman. I remember her being a lawyer. And I mean, it was a total takedown. She trashed Kamala and just talked about her predatory prosecution, black people as DA of San Francisco and AG of California. Also, check out the Tulsi clip on the debate stage during the 2019-2020 presidential election. I don't remember when the debate took place, but yeah, Tulsi, everything Tulsi said was 100% correct. And Tulsi ruined her chances to be president during that debate. She had the lowest approval rating of VP while she was vice president under Biden. They only chose her for identity politics reasons anyway. It's not like she's popular. She was going to lose her own state. She was going to lose the primary in her own state when she ran back in 2020. Stop it. So, really highly recommend y'all watch this. Now, moving on, in terms of democracy, and I want to, make this point clear. Check this out, y'all, from National Immigrant Justice Center. 200 NGOs oppose Biden's historic expansion of ICE detention system. Detention should not be about politics. So this is April 25th, 2024. After President Biden signed the 2024, let's underline this. After President Biden signed a 2024 spending bill that provides $3.4 billion for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to jail 41,500 immigrants per day. Okay? And this is basically just a money giveaway to Geo Group and Core Civic. Those are private jailers, for-profit jailers, So got to keep them in business, right? So the incentive is to lock up more people. The Guardian, Biden extended contracts to private immigration jails despite reports of horrific conditions. Revealed, Biden lays groundwork to expand immigration jails as Trump readies for office. In past year, the Biden administration has extended contracts for private sector jails before Trump's plan for mass deportations. It's like they're working hand in gloves, guys. Biden expands Trump-era border restrictions once again. New policy will further limit access to life-saving asylum. Biden expands Trump-era border restrictions. Biden administration, ICE contracts encourage forced labor. A contract signed in April with the detention facility of Port Isabel, Texas, continues a $1 a day wages for those detained. Damn. Putting people in slavery. Reports of trafficking and abuse of migrant children. Monthly calls to HHS reporting trafficking, neglect, or abuse of minors. Check out 2021 and 2022. Who was in office during that time? That's when things spiked massively. And we know what the result of all this ICE funding became. All right. Renee Nicole Good, may she rest in peace. But you see where this got us, right? So this is not just a Trump thing, okay? ICE records show Biden admin plans could give Trump a head start on deportations. Axios, January 15th, 2025. Check out the highlighted here. The proposals going back to September show that the Biden administration was preparing for its own expanded detention of immigrants while Democrats attacked President-elect Trump for his mass deportation plan. They were cooking Trump for it when they were planning to do the same shit. The big picture, the plans could give Trump a head start to launch the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history once he takes office, since detention is the most costly and labor-intensive piece of deportation. Both parties increased funding for ICE. Boosting ICE funding is bipartisan. Foreign policy, bipartisan. War, bipartisan. Not doing shit for working class Americans, bipartisan. Just a reminder, it is one big purple party. We do not have a democracy here. It is one big purple party. 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 It is one big purple party of PDF files. And they're protecting each other. Schumer and Jeffries refused to join Democrats' growing cause to slash ICE spending. Now, why would they not want to slash ICE spending after their former president did so much to increase it? A left-wing account. Democratic leadership continues to side with Trump over us every single time. We have no opposition party. Somebody gets it. Sabi Sobs. Does anyone remember who said in 2020 that Democrats would rather lose to Trump than allow someone to their left to win? Remember that definition of shitlibbery I gave? Where black liberals, all shitlibs, they punch left way harder than they punch right. And another thing here with Schumer and Jeffries. So the Democrats love to do the rotating villain. So under Biden, during the Biden regime, and yes, I'm using regime for the United States. Again, we don't live in a democracy. This regime, these regimes, they use it derogatorily when talking about other countries, like as if other countries can't have a government. No, fuck that. The U.S., this is a dictatorship of capital. A dictatorship of Zionist capital. But during the Biden regime, the rotating villains were Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. They were the ones who voted down like $15 minimum wage and all that. Moving on. How China and Russia are using Maduro's capture to sway U.S. discourse. So again, the Washington Post, Democratic aligned media, all in on imperialism. Supports these foreign adventures 100%. The Democrats supported the move in Venezuela. They just feigned not to by saying, "Oh well, you should have did it this way. You should have got congressional approval. You should have." They're fine with the outcome. They have to, find some way to quote unquote disapprove of it, but they didn't disapprove of the action itself. They disapproved on how it was carried out. That's not resistance. My senator, John Fetterman, Trump weighs preliminary plans for action on Iran as protests face violent crackdown. I fully supported our strike on Iranian nuclear facilities last year. Democrat John Fetterman. Build on this momentum if further kinetic actions are necessary. These brave protesters deserve our full support to break this brutal regime. They care way more about what's happening abroad and bombing other people abroad to steal their shit than they care about providing services for the American people. Here's Fetterman all in on Trump's policy. One big purple party. Andrew Yang, All in. I think the U.S. should help the people of Iran. Andrew Yang, Democrat. Here's Ben Norton, what he had to say. If the U.S. actually cared about the people of Iran, it would immediately lift its illegal unilateral sanctions, which are a form of collective punishment that aim to destroy the economy to destabilize the government. Hint, the U.S. empire doesn't truly care about the Iranian people. Exactly. They want them to suffer so that they overthrow the government. Andrew Yang again. Democrat, Andrew Yang. I think the U.S. should help the people of Iran. Here's Madonna Kalusian. She says, photos of U.S. helping the people of Iraq by stealing all their gold and artifacts and shit. All the West does is steal. All these foreign wars are not to protect any civilians, it's to get in there, get their corporations in there to extract wealth that they can privatize for themselves, while the people have to live on $2 a day. But the Democrats are synonymous with democracy. When both parties support the same illegal wars, the same corrupt capitalist system, it means it's time for a revolution. 100% proud socialist. Always dropping bangers on Twitter X. Another one. Republicans and Democrats are not two distinct parties. They operate as one party united behind preserving a capitalist dictatorship that exploits workers at home and invades countries abroad, all to enrich corporations and billionaires. Voting won't change this. Only revolution will. Again, it is one big purple party. That's how it works. The ratchet effect. How you are being duped by the two-party system. The Republicans turn everything to the right. You can see Trump doing that now. The Democrats block movement back to the left. And this is why the Democrats are so disappointing. This is why, nobody's showing up for them. This is why their approval ratings right now under Trump, while he's doing all this fascist shit, are still so low, or still the lowest they've been. The Democrats should win damn near every election. And they would if they actually delivered something substantive for the people. Instead, all they offer are optics, identity politics, and they refuse to produce real material gains. Democratic Party should be synonymous with no tangibles. Just half-ass policies that often do more harm than good. Just look at ACA, Obamacare. All that policy did was entrench the position of the private healthcare system, private healthcare insurance companies that don't even need to exist. They should not exist. They're just a money-making entity that denies people's claims, denies people health care, just so they can collect the profit. That is an immoral system. I don't care that a handful of people had a positive experience with Obamacare. The vast majority of us are suffering. That is not a healthcare solution, and that's why health outcomes are still shit and getting even worse in the United States. How is Obamacare a success? It's not. So again, you get nothing meaningful from the Democrats that improves people's lives when they get into office. Their entire pitch boils down to vote for us because we're not Trump. And that's not good enough anymore. That's not good enough. How do you lose to Trump twice? First election should have been a layup. 2024 election would have been a layup too. Like I said, if the Democrats weren't so willing to participate in a genocide and be the genocidocrats, they would have won this thing. Dems always support imperial violence abroad. They stay beholden to the same entrenched interests and owners, no matter the moral cost. That's why I say it's one big purple party. No matter who you vote for, the same policies keep rolling out, especially when it comes to foreign policy. There's no effective difference when it comes to foreign policy. Different rhetoric, same outcomes. At some point, I just feel like people have to stop pretending that this is a failure of messaging or voter ignorance. It's a failure of political will, a refusal to break with power. So you don't just lose. They didn't just lose the electoral college. They lost the popular vote in every swing state. I mean, it's wild, man. I mean, Kamala lost not just the electoral college, but she lost the popular vote, and she lost every swing state to Trump. If you're a qualified candidate, that just wouldn't have happened. But just like the Democrats shelving the autopsy report, They don't really want to look inside and do any deep soul searching. You know, to the Democrats, to them, their mindset is, we don't fail. We can only be failed. If we didn't make it into office because the voters, it's their fault. You guys need to be scolded. Your job is to vote for us no matter what. So let's get into a couple clips. So Norman Solomon was on Democracy Now! He wrote this article, Why is the Democratic Party hiding its 2024 autopsy? So let's listen to what he had to say here.
The Democratic Party hiding its 2024 autopsy report, in which he argues, quote, a party unable to publicly examine its own failings is unlikely to climb out of the rut that proved so helpful to Donald Trump in 2024. Norm, thank you so much for being with us. So why don't you answer that question for us? Why is the Democratic Party hiding its 2024 autopsy report? What report is that?
Well, it was officially going to be released before the election in November this year. Then the can was kicked down the road, and we were told it would be released by the end of the year. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because the history of the Democratic Party is a repetition compulsion to serve corporate power, and it can't withstand the light of day. And so rather than do self-examination, the people running the Democratic National Committee decided to just pretend that, as the saying goes, look forward, not backward. But if you don't examine real history, then you're in a cycle that repeats the same problems. And so when, in response to what we anticipated would be either a whitewash official report from the Democratic Party or none at all, as it turned out, our team at Roots Action put together our own autopsy, and we found that it really echoed the same kind of critique that we presented in our autopsy after the 2016 election. In fact, if you were to swap the names Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, it would be entirely accurate in a lot of the report, because in both cases, and here we have elections, 8 years apart, service to corporate power, hostility to the progressive wing of the party, out of control militarism, disconnection from the base of the working class. That's been a common thread of the Democratic Party. As we celebrate and look forward to the mayoral reality in New York City coming up, I think it's really notable and very important to remember that, as the saying goes, the Democratic Party is a field of struggle. And I work at Roots Action with the colleague India Walton. 4 years ago, as a Democratic Socialist, she won the Democratic Party nomination in the city of Buffalo, the second largest city in the state. And then right-wing Democrats teamed up with racists and Republicans and defeated her with a rubber stamp write-in campaign. Well, that's a defeat. And a lot of people who are defeatist, unfortunately, or say, hey, forget about the Democratic Party, they say, oh, we lose. We can't defeat the Democratic Party elite leadership. Well, see what happened 4 years later is another Democratic Socialist didn't give up, and because of being part of a social movement, was able to not only galvanize tens of thousands of volunteers, but actually win. So I just sort of sum up by saying that the official Democratic Party leadership, such as it is unwilling, unable to really examine the true history of that party and the capacity of that party to respond to the working class, which has been diminishing. And at the same time, when people organize and when people look at real history and struggle to change what comes up in the future, we can win victories.
Norman, I want to get back to this DNC autopsy. The Harris campaign spent $1.5 billion in just 107 days of their campaign. What did they spend all that money on?
They spent it on consultants. They spent it on TV ads. They spent it on the traditional way that when you don't believe in your party base and you try to win an election from the top down, you squander the money. And there has not been transparency with the DNC or the various presidential campaigns of the party. It's very lucrative. It's a racket. They win whether they win or lose. It's sort of like, I would compare it to the weapons manufacturers and the military-industrial complex. You know, the U.S., quote, lost in Vietnam, lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the military-industrial complex, corporate America, they never lose. And in a similar way, the consultants who are intertwined with corporate America and militarism at the Democratic Party at the very high levels, they have huge quantities of dollars shoveled their way. And frankly, they would rather lose the presidential election and retain control of the Democratic Party than, heaven forfend, have Bernie Sanders be the nominee, and they would lose control of the party.
Yep. Wow. So there's another clip that I want to show here too. This is Norman Solomon talking about how Kamala lost due to Gaza. So yeah, so let's take a look at this clip as well.
And could you talk about, in terms of the analysis of Roots Action, to what degree the National Democratic Party and obviously Biden and Harris positions on the war in Gaza affected the turnout for president?
Well, there's no doubt that the polling at the time, as early as August 2024, showed that in crucial swing states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, that if Kamala Harris had been willing to call for an arms embargo, even say she would consider an arms embargo on Israel as it continued its genocide against Palestinian people in Gaza, that she would have gained a lot more votes than she would have lost. This was not a secret. And retrospective polling shows very clearly that she very well may have won the election and be in the White House today if she'd been willing to break from the Israel right or wrong keeps shoveling arms to the murderous regime there. If she had broken with that policy of the Biden White House, as they say, she might well be president today. And I do again see a parallel between 2016 and 2024, when corporate Democrats, when the militarists control the party, then we have the kind of events and the losses where Hillary Clinton picks up, I mean, we're talking checks, $250,000 for one check, one speech that Hillary Clinton got. And then she turns around and says she's a candidate for working people. It's preposterous. And then we had Kamala Harris saying that she couldn't think of anything that she would do differently than Joe Biden. Well, that signified the complete moral collapse of the Harris campaign last year, just as Joe Biden's policy of supporting genocide also was a collapse of the Democratic Party from the top. One of the things that we emphasize in this new Roots Action autopsy report, which, by the way, is online at democraticautopsy.org, is that it was very clear that this was the case, and that Biden and the hierarchy of the Democratic Party have a 50-plus year history of very clearly saying that whatever Israel does, we're going to support it. Well, in point of fact, the polling, not only in the swing states, but across the country, then and today, which brings us to the current time, shows that the top of the party, most of the Democrats in Congress, certainly the DNC, they're way disconnected from what people actually want. And that's the parallel again with the polling was very clear. Democrats didn't want Biden to run again, and the elites at the top essentially said to Democratic voters and independents around the country, we know what you want, even if that's not what you say you want. One unpublicized reality in the last few months is that when the DNC held its semi-annual meeting in August, because of the pressure to take a position against sending further arms to Israel, the chair of the DNC, Ken Martin, pledged that he would appoint a task force to study Democratic Party policy towards Israel. 4 months later, nothing has happened. We don't even have an announcement of the members of who is on this task force of the Democratic Party. And this is a way of saying, actually, we don't care. We run the Democratic Party, and arms are coming from the United States to slaughter men, women, children in Gaza. Now there's all these restrictions on basic humanitarian aid, the genocide, the gradual extermination of the lives of so many Palestinian people. We don't care. We don't have to. We run the Democratic Party. So, well, that has to change from the bottom up. And let me just say that Elon.
So yeah, there we have it. I don't really have much to add to that, but I will just say that Democrats do what they do best, and that's just symbolism and performance, man. You know, the appearance of progress without any true tangible change. And that's why their approval ratings are so low, right? So, you know, Democratic Party produces folks like Carl, you know, who just make excuses for the party, don't want to challenge the party, don't want to think outside of any of the party narratives. You know, they just obey. But hopefully, you know, looking at it through this lens will encourage people to start thinking critically. And like I said, we have an obligation to educate the community, right? So, like I said, Black Liberals with Degrees is the start of a new series, right? I got a lot of folks that I need to make videos for. Trust me, you know, I have plenty of friends who are just brilliant, you know, otherwise. But when it comes to election time, their critical thinking and discernment go right out the window, okay, because their heads are too far up the Democratic Party's ass that they can't get any other perspective. So I can't wait to share more of these stories. Hope you enjoyed this one. Part 2 is coming soon. And yeah, like, share, subscribe. Until next time, you all take care and do not engage in shitlibbery ever. Peace.